Hello, and welcome to the next in the Effective Writing Center series of workshops. I'm Dan Gallagher, director of the EWC. Today's workshop is titled 3 Punctuation Marks You Should Be Using But Are Too Afraid To, and is being presented by Anna Dumonchel and Suzanne Hill. Anna Dumonchel is a lead writing advisor at the EWC and has worked at the Writing Center in various functions, including writing advisor, writing fellow, and database coordinator. She has a BA in anthropology from University of Maryland College Park. Anna finds her work at the EWC rewarding because it combines her love of writing with her passion for teaching. She sincerely enjoys helping students become more confident writers. Suzanne Hill has a master's degree in professional writing from Towson University. She has enjoyed working with students in her role as a writing advisor with the Effective Writing Center for about 5 years. She's been teaching college courses in freshman composition, logic, business writing, and literary analysis for many years now. To ask a question during the broadcast, please use the chat feature in YouTube below the viewing window. And this workshop, like all of our workshops, will be archived for future viewing in the Effective Writing Center's Google Plus community, as well as on my YouTube page under Daniel Gallagher. And now let's begin tonight's workshop. We'll go over to you, Anna.
Thanks, Dan. Semicolons, colons, and dashes. 3 misunderstood punctuation marks. Many writers avoid them altogether for fear of using them incorrectly. Today, we'll describe and define each of these 3 punctuation marks. We will also provide examples to illustrate their functions, and then cover some basic guidelines for when it's appropriate to use them. So why bother with semicolons, colons, and dashes at all? You've heard the saying, variety is the spice of life. This also holds true with writing. When you vary your punctuation, just as you would vary your word choice or sentence structure, you help to keep the reader interested. And sometimes a semicolon, colon, or dash can help you say just exactly what you need to. Our goal is to leave here today feeling confident enough to begin using the semicolon, colon, and dash in our own writing. Now I'll pass the mic to my colleague Suzanne, who will talk about the first punctuation mark on our agenda, semicolons. Suzanne, take it away.
Thanks, Anna. Okay, so the main goal of a semicolon is to join or link 2 closely related ideas. A semicolon looks like a comma with a period above it. And the way the semicolon looks can actually serve as a useful reminder of how it is used. You see, a semicolon joins thoughts together in a sentence with more separation than a comma, but less than a period. Let's take a closer look at how this rule plays out in a few specific situations. The first key function of a semicolon is to join 2 independent clauses or complete thoughts that can stand on their own. Remember, a semicolon indicates a closer relationship between ideas than a period would show. It replaces a full stop between sentences when we want to connect the 2 independent clauses more closely. This can be a tricky concept to grasp. So let's take a look at 2 examples. First, John was hurt, semicolon. He knew she only said it to upset him. In this example, there's a complete thought or clause before the semicolon and another after the semicolon. So why use a semicolon when you could divide this into 2 short sentences with a period between them? Well, a semicolon is a good choice in this example because the independent clauses are very closely linked. John was hurt as a direct result of her saying something to upset him. Similarly, in the second example, footsteps thudded on a thick rug, semicolon. We were not alone in the house. The sound of footsteps is directly linked to the realization that we aren't alone. So the semicolon is an effective punctuation choice. Joining these 2 clauses into a single sentence with a semicolon, rather than dividing them into short sentences with a period, also makes the writing flow more smoothly. Also, semicolons can help a series of items make more sense. If you have a list and some of the items in the list have commas within them, separating the items with additional commas is just terribly confusing. Separate them with semicolons instead, like this. The meeting attendees included Mrs. Perkins, the kindergarten teacher, semicolon, Mr. Shoemate, the 6th grade teacher, semicolon, Ms. Wallace, the PE teacher, semicolon, and Mrs. Barber, the principal. Notice how much easier it is to distinguish each of the items listed in the sentence because of the semicolons between them. If we had used only commas in the sentence, it would be much more confusing. Okay, Anna, those are the 2 ways a semicolon can join or link ideas. Now, can you tell us a bit about the colon?
You bet, Suzanne. First, let's distinguish between a semicolon and a colon, because they do look similar and writers sometimes confuse them. While a semicolon is made up of a dot over a comma, a colon looks like 2 dots or periods, one placed above the other. The colon is used to relate independent clauses or complete thoughts in order to clarify or elaborate on ideas. We'll discuss 4 specific ways a colon can elaborate or clarify. One place you are likely to use a colon is before a direct quotation. Here is an example of this rule. He thought for a moment and then said, colon, yes, I'll buy the house. You can see that the colon appears directly before the direct quotation. The second way a colon can restate, explain, or clarify is by joining in another independent clause or complete thought. In other words, if you write something and then you feel it needs to be explained further in another independent clause, you can put a colon between them. When you do this, you'll need to capitalize the first letter of each clause as though they were separate sentences. Here's an example of this rule. The power company turned off his electricity for one reason, colon, he hadn't paid his bill in months. Notice how there is an independent clause or complete thought before the colon and another independent clause after the colon. The clause after the colon further explains the point of the sentence. Also pay attention to capitalization. The first letter of the clause after the colon is capitalized. Here is a simple rule for colon usage. Colons are placed after the greeting or salutation in a formal business letter. In a friendly, informal letter, you place a comma after the greeting, but a business letter uses a colon to appear more formal. For example, you might write, Dear Mr. Hudson, colon, I am writing to request that. You can distinguish this business letter from a personal letter in part because of the colon instead of a comma after the greeting. The 4th main function of a colon is to introduce an item or a series of items. For example, he packed his carry-on suitcase with essential travel items, colon, toiletries, a cell phone charger, and a change of clothes. This list of essential travel items appears directly after the colon. Notice the words in this list are not capitalized because they are not an independent clause or complete thought. All right, I think that about wraps things up for the colon. Suzanne, can you tell us about the dash?
Sure, I'd be glad to, Anna. A dash looks similar to a hyphen, which is used to connect compound words. However, a dash is longer than a basic hyphen. In most word processing programs, like Microsoft Word, the dash is created by typing 2 hyphens in a row, which are then automatically connected into the longer punctuation mark known as the dash. A dash is used when a writer wants to interrupt herself in some way. We'll cover 3 specific ways a writer can use the dash to interrupt a sentence. First, you can use a dash when you need to interject a modifier into a sentence. A modifier is simply a word or phrase that describes a noun. The dashes are useful in drawing attention to the modifier. Here's an example of this function. Our favorite hiking trail, dash, now slippery with ice and snow, dash, will be closed until springtime. Using dashes allowed us to break in after the noun in this sentence, hiking trail, and add an important modifier. We interjected to tell the reader that the trail was slippery due to ice and snow. Without the modifier, the sentence would have been much less informative. You can also use a dash to indicate sentence introductions and conclusions. Here is a sentence with a brief introduction set off by a dash. Books, paper, pencils, dash. Many students lacked even the simplest tools for learning in 19th century America. And in the following sentence, the conclusion of the sentence is set off by a dash. After many months of deliberation, the jurors reached a unanimous verdict, dash, guilty. Another function of the dash is to interject supplementary information into a sentence. Let's look at an example. Even the simplest tasks, dash, washing, dressing, and going to work, dash, were nearly impossible after I broke my leg. If we deleted the dashes and the words between them, the sentence would still make sense. However, it would be lacking detail. That's why the information is supplementary. It adds to the meaning of the sentence, but it isn't required. Adding the dashes and the specific tasks makes this a much stronger sentence. That wraps up our discussion of the dash. So now I'll hand things back over to Anna, who is going to help us practice the punctuation rules we've discussed so far.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne. Let's do a quick recap of the key differences between the semicolon, the colon, and the dash. If we had to boil each of the punctuation marks down to a single goal, we might say that semicolons join and connect linked clauses, colon, clarify or elaborate, and dashes interrupt or interject. We know that within each of these goals is a variety of specific functions, but this cheat sheet can help us to quickly distinguish between each of these three punctuation marks. Using the rules we've discussed, let's take a quick quiz to see if we can correctly identify each punctuation mark in an example. Here's our first sample sentence. I haven't been here in way too long, blank. I'm so happy to be back. Here we have two independent clauses or complete thoughts. The two clauses are closely linked. How can we fill in the blank to unite the clauses into a cohesive sentence? That's right, we can join the closely connected clauses into one sentence by adding a semicolon. Nice work. Okay, let's tackle the next challenge. This sample sentence says, I always look for 3 traits in my employees, blank, motivation, friendliness, and punctuality. This sentence includes a series of items after the blank. So how can we introduce that series of items? A colon is an excellent choice to fill in this blank and introduce the series of items. Let's move on to our third and final sample sentence, which says, it's hard to walk my dog down my street because right next to our house is the vet's office, blank, his least favorite place in the world. What is happening in this sentence? The writer interrupts herself with this blank in order to add supplementary information about the vet's office. Do you recall which punctuation mark is used to interject or interrupt? That's right, a dash is the appropriate choice. The dash separates one of the elements of this sentence and places an emphasis on supplementary information. Next, Suzanne is going to review some tips for using semicolons, colons, and dashes wisely.
Okay, thanks, Anna. Before we wrap up our presentation, let's discuss a few guidelines for semicolons, colons, and dashes. The things to know about these punctuation marks is to use them sparingly. Just like any element of writing, it is possible to have too much of a good thing, including too many semicolons in your sentences can come off as pretentious. And writing that is filled with lots of colons tends to look overly formal and stuffy. Finally, too many dashes makes a paper feel choppy. Try to vary the types of punctuation marks you use. Doing so will make your writing clearer and more lively. Are there any questions?
I do not see any questions at this point, Anna and Suzanne.
Okay. Well, you are welcome to contact the Effective Writing Center anytime with questions. Our email address is here. It's writingcenter@umuc.edu. Please join us for our next workshop on April 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The topic will be how to write and design your LinkedIn page, America's #1 job site. We look forward to seeing you there. Any final words, Anna?
Well, I just want to say thank you for attending this evening's presentation on the semicolon, colon, and dash.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you to everybody who is viewing now or will view in the future. As mentioned, you can feel free to contact the EWC at any point at writingcenter@umuc.edu. And you can submit your work to the Writing Center for review by logging into My UMUC and going to Submit to Writing Center. We will see you again in a month, hopefully. Until then, best of luck in your writing.
Thank you.